Now it's taken a while to load up the module tree. Eventually though, it's going to give me a list of options of things I can do. MSF client, like I said, if you want to script stuff, that'd be the thing to look into. I'm going to hit Q to quit out of that. And I would show up MSF GUI, but it doesn't seem to work in the version of Backtrack 4 I have. But since it's going away anyway, no point even showing it. I'll go ahead and bring up MSF Web. By the way, for those who are not familiar with Linux or Unix in general, Bash shell, tab completion works on here. So if you hit tab, it should try to complete the words you're typing in based on what path it is. I'll go ahead and put an and symbol into that just so it runs and then returns me to the shell. And here shortly, I should hopefully have a web server listening on localhost 55555 and be able to configure some things in Metasploit. Let's see if that's actually up. Now the way this is configured off Backtrack 4, only the local host can connect to this. Other people outside can't connect into this particular website. That's very good from a security standpoint. Oh, by the way, those who are wondering why you had to start networking yourself, it's generally a good call from a standpoint of not being detected, not to have your network card automatically connect to the network. You may want to change things like, well, your MAC address if you're really paranoid, or make other little network settings, or change what services are listening before you connect. So that's why you have to manually tell Backtrack 4 to connect to the network. That is basically the reason why they did it that way, right, Martin?
Correct.
By the way, if anybody doesn't know Martin, Martin is one of the core Backtrack 4 development team. Alright, we got the web interface up. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into exploits and look for an exploit. Now, Movix of Hack5 fame, and I actually have this link at the end of my notes here, suggested using PSEXEC as an exploit to use. The reason is it's not an exploit in the sense of a vulnerability, but if you know the password and username on a box, you can just type that in, and essentially it uses the administrative services to start a process up. The reason I'm using it here is it's very reliable, and as long as you know a password for it, it'll work. Yes?
One thing that's interesting in PSSec too is it also does pass the hash. So when you extract the hash values off of it, you don't even need to crack the password. You can just take those hash values, pop it into the password.
Yeah, I'll let him explain that a little bit.
Sure.
I'm going to show that.
You're going to show it? Yeah, so like when we go through Metasploit Express a little bit, you'll actually see that like when you compromise the system, you get the hash values off of it. Then you can just scan through the entire network, and then every single hash value that password associates to, you can compromise like hundreds of machines if you needed to if you had the same password.
Yeah, because most people, local admins, are going to have the same password duplicated across the entire, a whole bunch of systems because they're basing it off an image. Yeah. I know that's in the way places that I've been. Question though, does it matter what NTLM version you're using?
If you're using NTLM version 2, it doesn't work, but if it's, say for example, if it's a 17-character password and it doesn't have an LM hash, it'll still work. It just doesn't pass the hash for LM or NTLM. It doesn't matter.
Okay, but you said NTLM 2 only.
NTLM version 2 I doubt would work. It might though.
Alright.
I've tried.
Well, I have up PS Execute. This came up. I'm going to click there. And hopefully in a second I'll be able to set me some options. Sometimes it'll ask you what target. For instance, it might say Windows 2000, Windows XP. There's slightly different return addresses, and it's my understanding between different Windows releases and different service packs. So I think that's more Elliot's thing coming up shortly. I'm giving you little previews of really nice stuff. Alright. Now I'm to the point where I have to choose a payload. And there's a bunch of payloads I could choose. But let's choose one that would be good to show execs. The main reason I'm showing off the MSF Web one is if you show an exec how easy it is to compromise the box via MSF console, they may not buy it because it looks complicated. The web interface is much prettier, much easier to understand, and if I show them I got an interpreter session, that's not as impressive to an exec, even though it's far more useful than me getting the remote GUI. So we're going to attempt to get the remote GUI. I'm going to do a real quick search. Oh, by the way, one thing I may not have noted here is in Backtrack 4, at least I think I had it on here before, if you have no script enabled, you may have disabled no script to get the MSF web interface to work properly. So let me go ahead and find something. The particular exploit I want to find, and this time I'm using the find built-in to Firefox, I want to find one called, where did I find it? VNC Inject. There's a couple different versions of VNC Inject. The one I want to use is the one that essentially reverses the connection back to me. And did I go past it? Oh, actually, I'm not even anywhere near it. Alright. That's bind TCP. There it is. Right, it's the HTTP one. That one tries to hide the traffic as web traffic. I know it's in here eventually. There's a lot of different payloads. There you can see I've already selected it before. Alright. I set that, and now I just have to set up a few options. First of all, my remote host, which I wrote down earlier. In my case, it's 192.168.184.129. Actually, sorry, 130. For my password, I know it's password. Yes, I know it's incredibly weak. Luckily, hopefully, these boxes out there are only meant to be hacked. Let me see. Oh, for account, I'm not going to use administrator. We're going to use Metasploit. And for local host, this is basically the host I'm trying to tell it to connect back to. Remember, I'm using a reverse session, so it's going to try to connect back to me. So if it was like behind a NAT box, it'd have an easier time getting back out, or any firewall with weak egress filtering. So I'm going to tell it to connect back to me at my local host. Well, not my local host as in my loopback address, but the IP address that Metasploit is actually running from, which in this case is 192.168.184.129. And if I put all that right, let me go ahead and, there's various advanced options I can set, which I'm not going to go into as of right now, but you can bounce things through proxies and so forth. Take a look at those later on. I'm going to launch the exploit, and hopefully I won't have to launch more than once to actually get it to work. Let's see what happens. For some reason it brings up my console. By the way, confusing thing about the console when it comes up in the web interface, you may think you can start typing any place. You have to click down here to get it to work. You type exploit, and hopefully it does its thing. Hopefully it's also bringing up.
You got a session.
Was that?
You got a session.
Cool. I'm going to go to my. And I see a little courtesy console came up right there for me. But I'm going to switch back to my Backtrack 4 box. And you see I now have a VNC session where I can control the box. This isn't actually as useful as having an interpreter on the box, but it's more flashy to show someone. Alright, I've done that. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and exit out of all of this. And I'm now going to move on to instead using MSF console. Now we're going to be using these stuff throughout the day. I'm basically covering the very intro. I'm sort of a noob when it comes to Metasploit, and hopefully all the other instructors will cover for the things that I'm lacking in. Alright, we're going to start with MSF console, and it's probably going to take a bit to iterate through all the modules it has. Okay, now that that's up, I'm going to do a few little odds and ends. I could type ifconfig right here. This is just to show you that anything you can execute at the command line, you can pretty much execute inside of MSF console. There's my IP address, which we've already covered before. This is just to show you there's some other command you run around, like let's say nmap or whatnot, you should be able to. The next thing I want to do is bring up help. And unfortunately, right here, we got the scroll. In 3.4, I'd really love to have a less option. That would be so cool. Kim said he had a way around this, so Kim, maybe if you can show that later. He said he had some kind of screen solution that was supposed to allow you to see it one page at a time. Okay. Show me that later, man. I'd be interested, because it would really help my workflow with this. All right. I'm going to use a particular exploit. I know